Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bordertown Strange. I'm Pam, and this is my co-host, Jess. And we have with us tonight a couple of fan favorites and a couple of our favorites, too. We've got Mark Bannon and Enzo Cyril. So, yay, thanks for joining us, guys.
Whoa.
Yay!
Jason Roberts was going to join us this evening, but he's had some personal things that him and his family are dealing with. So we're sending all kinds of good vibes and energy and prayers their way. But before we get started, Jess, do you want to do a little housekeeping?
Yep, just the huge. Ooh, the huge.
Kind of like how the kids talk these days.
That's right. I'm Jiggy. I don't know. That's not what they say nowadays. It's from me. Okay, never mind. Moving on.
Yeah, that's
Just forget that last little part. Moving on.
As little part ever.
As always. Oh God. Oh, Enzo's already started with the sound effects. Hi, Ian. Okay, as always, a huge thank you to our new subscribers and new followers and to our old ones. We appreciate you so much. If you'll just take a second, if you're on Facebook, give us a like and a share. And if you are on YouTube, just give us a quick thumbs up and ring that bell if you haven't already, so you know that when we go live. Also, you can find us on all of your podcast providers, so if you'd like to listen to us off air or you don't catch the live show, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Also, if you wouldn't mind, if you're listening on a podcast right now, take a minute and give us a rating. We would so appreciate that if we could get on to the ratings. The higher our ratings go, the more stuff that we can bring you. And like I said, we appreciate it so much.
Woohoo.
Also, if you have any show ideas or a favorite topic that you just love, drop it in the comments below or send us a text, or not a text, an email, and let us know what that is, and we will add it to our program lineup. And I think that's it. Just remember to stay around until the end of the show, and we'll play a few rounds of the notebook game. And then on with word of the week, or words of the week, I should say this time.
What the weird words.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. Okay. So tonight our topic is going to be near-death experience. So I thought that would be a fun one to pull up and use. A near-death experience, or an NDE, is a conscious, semi-conscious, or recollected experience of someone who is approaching or has temporarily begun the process of dying. And then we also have crisis apparition, which is the vision or sense of a loved one around their time of death. Some Psi researchers suggest that crisis apparitions can be explained as a form of telepathy. And we're going to have a couple of stories that we'll throw in on that. It's really a fascinating thing. So I know I'd run across one. I know Enzo ran across one too. So we'll get those in by the end of the show. So let me get my notes up over here. I'm blinding myself with my Google Docs because I didn't get dark mode on. So if you see me doing this, that'll be why. Goodness. I don't know if it's old age or just I've gotten used to dark mode on everything. I think that's what it is. Okay. So, yeah, right. So tonight's topic is near-death experiences. And again, it's a conscious or semi-conscious or recollected experience of someone who's approaching or has temporarily begun the process of dying. An example would be like somebody going into a cardiac arrest that's followed by resuscitation. We see a lot of those. And people who recall near-death experiences, they've described it as perceiving like a variety of surreal phenomena, such as seeing themselves from like they were looking down upon the scene, or like they're passing through a tunnel of light, things like that. A lot of these reports include things that are, religious or spiritual interpretations. And so that's really fueled a lot of debates about whether a person's conscious can persist after death. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about. And that's really what the gist of this is. Does consciousness survive after death? So yeah, that'll be the fun part of it tonight. What we're going to be doing is we'll be talking a lot about, I know we have some stories to bring forward. We'll talk about what some of the commonplace themes that seem to pop up around near-death experiences are, and things like that. So in the chat. There's Tony. Hi, Tony. Ginger's in the chat. Hey.
I wish Phil had been able to get on here because he had a couple good ones.
Did he? Oh, that's too bad.
He's shared them on the shows before, so.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Gotcha. Now there's, I want to point this out. So a few weeks ago, and I don't know if I may have talked about this already, but a few weeks ago, Ginger actually found on Facebook Marketplace somebody selling the entire 31 book set collection of Reader's Digest, Mysteries of the Unknown, and they were in pristine condition. So we were like, she sends it to me, and I was like, oh, how close is it? And she's like, it's just 20 minutes away from us. And I was like, oh my God. So I contacted the guy, and he was like, yeah, I still have them. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah. So me and Ginger and Jennifer that we work with, after work, we all ran over there, and it was really odd, kind of a lot of synchronicity going on, because we get there and it turns out that the guy is the husband of the woman that was Jennifer's second mom, basically growing up. So she got to see her, which was really cool. And then while we're there, and I'll show you, they look great. Look at that. They're perfect. They're
perfect.
They are. And then mint for sure. While I'm there, the husband's like, I have these other Reader Digest books. Would you be interested in them? And I was like, what are they? And he's like, oh, I don't know. It's like stuff on witches and magic and spells and things. And I was like, maybe. Can I see? So yeah, exactly. So we go and look, and they're actually missing one book in that series. And so I was like really interested in it. And I'd never heard of this one. I can't remember what it's called. It's like, I don't know, something else. But I was like, well, how much, are you selling those for? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. We're missing one book, $75 for all of them. And I was like, okay, so I took them too, completely broke, but completely thrilled afterwards. Get them home, look them up. And there's one book missing. I can get the one book for like $15, but the set of those particular books they're on eBay and Etsy for like $600 a set. So I was like, holy crap.
That's crazy.
I like how she pretended that she act all cool and collected. Meanwhile, she was screaming, take my money, take my money.
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly what I was doing. I was like,
are you interested?
Shut up and take my money.
Yes.
The guy's like, get this crap out of my house. And I'm over here like,
yeah. She couldn't get it in her car fast enough.
Could not.
We were talking earlier, the one book that's missing from all the Magic and Mayhem series or whatever it is he bought. It's like the one that has all the cures for all the spells and how to deactivate them all and remove curses and all that stuff. The one you really need.
That's funny. The one that's the one that we're missing, it's called like The Power of Love or something like that. And I was just like,
lame.
Well, I hate to tell you,
Huey Lewis in the news.
There's a whole
That's
set
true.
of the Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown on sale in Lexington, Missouri.
really? Well, I've got them all now. I don't need them. They were only 20 minutes away. And I got a free tote out of the whole deal.
Free coat.
Free tote.
You felt, tote.
Tote. They came in a tote. So, yay. There's another $15 right there. That'll pay for the book. There we go.
The guy felt sorry for her. Like, man, she really was a sucker and bid on all this. Here, I'll just keep the tote. That's fine.
So where I live in the same apartment complex that my mom lives
out
in.
of my house.
And where I park is like right, and she watches constantly. So she saw us pull in, right? So Jennifer and I are like going to the back of my Jeep, and we're like, I had my big my wagon, basically my fold-up wagon. Took it out, loaded it up, and then we took it around the back of the Jeep, way around the edge, so she couldn't see us hauling all this stuff in.
How old are you? And you're still hiding stuff for your mother, Pam?
Have you met my mother? She's a little judgy sometimes.
Every neighborhood has the Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched in there. It's always peeking out the windows, seeing whatever all the neighbors are doing.
My mom. You've met my mom. To death. But whew. Too funny. Okay, anyway, back to our topic for tonight.
Girl.
Right? Ginger, you are so right. And Ginger was with me. Ginger actually instigated this whole thing, which I am so grateful for.
Blaming her.
No, I'm not. Well, I'm not blaming her. I'm thanking her because, yeah, she's the reason I was able to get them because I would have never seen them. I've only bought things on Facebook Marketplace, and I can't go little. You know, the first thing was my son's car, but he was what? He was a sophomore in high school when I bought that. He just graduated college last year, and it just died, and I paid like $3,000 for it back then. It was like
really owe you anything.
No, not at all. And then this was the other thing. So they were both really good buys.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of the book thing going around. I mean, I see your background and you can see mine. It's like,
that's the sad part. That, all three of you have been to my house before. That behind me goes down that hallway with books, and then there's another bookshelf that size in the other room full of books. So,
yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a book addict.
Right? Chelsea said Reader's Digest are like contraband book for Pam, according to her mom. NDE of Pam's mom and caught her hauling more stuff into the house, right?
It's more like when her bookshelf collapses and brings the building down.
Oh, yeah. That could suck.
You know.
Ginger, at least she didn't have to buy another bookshelf yet. Yet being the key word. There's Jennifer. Jennifer was in on it with us. Funny.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get back to our near-death experiences here. I'm squirreling all over the place tonight, guys. You're going to have to reel me in, I'm sure. So when I was a kid, actually, you know, these were my mom's books at the time. There was a gentleman, he was a doctor named Raymond Moody. And back in the 70s, when he actually first started medical school, he got really interested in near-death experiences. And even before he actually became a doctor, he started gathering up stories as he went along. And he decided, you know, it hadn't been studied very widely at the time. So he decided he wanted to go ahead and conduct his own survey and do his own interviews and everything. And he did. And with his first book, he ended up writing, it had like 150 stories in it, which was pretty significant. And some of them came from people who were resuscitated after having been declared dead. And then others were accounts of people who, through accident or like severe illness, had come very close to death. But after he studied all these firsthand stories, he was able to identify 15 elements that are recurring themes among near-death experiences. And these really still hold true today, even though this was from the 70s. And, you know, a lot of things have changed since then. But now not all of them will be present in any one case, or do they, you know, necessarily occur in any sequence. But theoretically, you know, his words, they go like this, basically. So I'm just going to run through them real quick. So you have, the first one is, a man is dying, and as he reaches the point of the greatest physical distress, he hears himself pronounced dead. Okay, that's number one. And then number two, he starts to hear an uncomfortable noise like a loud ringing or buzzing. And then number three, he starts to feel himself moving very rapidly through a dark tunnel. And then after this, number four, he suddenly finds himself outside of his own physical body, but still in the immediate physical environment. So that means like he can see his own body from a distance as though he's a spectator. Okay. And then number six, after a while, he's going to collect himself and becomes a little bit more accustomed to his odd condition. And number seven, he notices that he still has a body, but it's not of the same nature as his, you know, flesh and bone body. It's very different. has very different powers than the physical body that he's become separated from. And then number 8, things start to happen. There's other people that have passed that come to meet him and to help him. And he glimpses spirits of relatives or friends that have already died. And, he gets like this loving, warm spirit of a kind, he's never encountered before. So it's like a being of light. Okay. And then number 9, this being asks him a question non-verbally to make him evaluate his life, and kind of helps him go through a slideshow of how his life, or an instant playback kind of thing of major events in his life. And then number 10, at some point he finds himself approaching some sort of barrier or border. So it like represents the limit of earthly life and the next life. And it's at this point that he finds out he has to go back to Earth because it's not time for him to die yet, basically. Number 11, at this point, he resists because he's like, he really likes what he's seeing, and he doesn't want to go back to his body because that's where the pain is, that's where all this trauma is happening. But he wants to move forward into the afterlife. And number 12, he's overwhelmed by feelings of intense joy, love, peace. And then number 13, despite his attitude, somehow he ends up reuniting with his physical body and returning to life as we know it. And then number 14, later he goes on and he tries to tell others about it, but he has trouble explaining the feelings or the euphoria that he felt. He can't find human words that are adequate, basically. Okay. And he also finds out other people make fun of him. They scoff at him. And so he stops telling people his story. And then number 15, even though all of this has happened and he stopped talking about it, this experience still affects his life so profoundly, especially his views when it comes to like death and its relationship to life. So from that point on, he takes an entirely different viewpoint of what is life? What is the meaning of life? What does it mean to be here? What is it, he no longer questions the fact that there's something out there, that our soul doesn't cease to exist when our body ceases to be alive, basically. So those are the 15 things that he has found. And again, this was back in the 70s, but when we look through these stories, you're going to see these as common themes. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we pointed them out. And I know, Enzo, you said you had a few stories gathered up. Do you want to throw one out there?
Sure. I've got one from a Dr. Tom Ofterhide. It's even worse to try and spell than pronounce, believe me. But came across his story. He has I'll put a link in the private chat if you can put it in the in there. So if anybody wants to check out this video themselves for the full story, it's like 9 minutes. But he was at a Academy of Sciences panel group where they were discussing basically surviving major cardiac events and stuff like that, cheating death kind of a thing. And I don't know if they exactly asked him to tell this story or he just decided to just tell it, but he has this story of when he first started off. It was his first day as a doctor, where he, he's done his intern type stuff and things like that. So he's officially a doctor now. He was on with a second-year intern as well, who had at least a couple of years experience. So he's like, and he really looked up to this guy. He's like, hey, I got your back. If anything happens, I'll be right there, making the rounds, doing all that stuff. I'll be right there. Don't worry about making any mistakes. I'm here for you. And so he was very excited to have, somebody that would help him out like that for his first day. They're making their rounds. He's showing them the ropes around the hospital, the whole thing. Gets to be about 3 o'clock in the morning. And his supervisor basically is like, I ain't going to make it. I'm going to go into the back office and catch 40 winks real fast. Just go ahead and keep making the rounds. If something happens, just have the nurses help you out. They know how to do most of the stuff anyways. If it gets really crazy, have one of them come and grab me. So A short time later, less than like 20, 30 minutes, he gets called down to the cardiac ward where they had a brand new patient that had just been admitted that day that was in full cardiac arrest. He was crashing. So he had gotten into the room first, realized what was going on. He starts doing CPR. This was in 1980, by the way, and the rules have changed a lot for how their process goes, which for back in 1980, what doctors did was if you're having a heart attack is they'd give you CPR until the crash cart got there, and they would basically just keep zapping you until you didn't come back from the zap anymore. So that's basically what they had to do to this guy. He's doing CPR. The other nurses and other techs come in with the crash cart and all that stuff. They zap him. Comes back. He's not conscious, but his heart rate kind of settles out and stuff like that for about 20 minutes, and then he's gone again. Zap him again, back. About 20, 25 minutes later, it's gone again. They got to zap him. Basically, it's like every 25, 30 minutes, they have to keep zapping this guy, but it keeps coming back. So after about an hour or so, the rest of the crash recovery folks are like, we got other stuff to do. You can zap this guy. You're a doctor and all. So we're going to go do our thing. If you need something, just yell. So about every 30 minutes, this guy, he would flatline, flap, it'd zap him again, and he'd pop back up. And this went on until well into the afternoon. It got to be about like 2:00 in the afternoon, and the food folks were doing their rounds, so they dropped off, this guy's lunch. And the doctor was like, Dr. Tom, he's like, it's not like he's going to eat this, and I'm starving. So he ate this guy's sandwich and all that stuff. And, but after about an hour or so after that, when it got to be like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, he finally stabilized where he didn't have to keep zapping him every 20, 30 minutes. And the guy made a complete recovery. He was in bad shape. It was about 30 days later that his patient was finally discharged where he could go home. So he had a long road of recovery and all that, but he stopped by every day, chatted with him, the whole works. And then he stopped by the last day when this guy was getting ready to get discharged. He's like, hey, Doc, come into the room, close the door, pull up a chair. I need to talk to you. I have 3 things I have to tell you. He's like, what's going on? He's like, look, I know you're just an intern. You're the new guy, but you're the only person that's actually spent more than 20 minutes with me the entire 30 days I've been here. Everybody else comes in for 30 seconds and they're out again. Business. And I got to tell you this, when I first came in that first day and I was crashing out, I found myself floating above my body, like I was in the top corner of the ceiling looking down on my body, and I could see you working on me. I could see that, when the other people came in with the crash cart and all that stuff, and then they just left you to sit in here. And where every time that, I don't know what the education level was. He didn't seem to be super high for this guy, whoever's patient was. He's like, yeah, I noticed that one bleeping chicken machine thing, whenever the lines would go all sawtooth, you'd zap me again, and then it would straight. You would, and he's thinking, okay, maybe he kind of was seeing these things a little bit, And but I got to tell you though, I was actually a little upset when my wife showed up, and you went out into the hallway and talked to her, and you did not give me a good chance of surviving. You did not make her feel good by telling her these things that I wasn't going to make it. And here I am right now. I made it. So he was a little pissed. And then on top of that, you ate my lunch.
I was going to ask if he was going to be mad that he ate a sandwich. I'd be mad.
He was upset.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, and the one thing after all of that is the biggest thing on your mind was you were upset because your supervisor basically never came back to help you. That's what you were really upset about. Not about me or my wife or any of that other stuff. That's what upset. And he that's when it kind of stopped. It was Dr. Tom. He was like, wait a minute. Did he know what I was thinking? Because it's right. That's what I was the most upset about, is this guy left me out to dry on my very first day. in the hospital. And there's a lot more to the story, which if you want to go check out that video, it's where basically they go on to have a further conversation about, I don't know what to do with this information, where he's like, well, talk to your priest. I did. I got about halfway through and he's like, that's not in the Bible. And he hung up the phone up. And he's like, hi, Dr. Tom is like, I don't know what to do. And so he called up one of the psychiatrists there in the hospital. He said he got about halfway through the story. He's like, that's just crazy, and hung up on him. So he didn't know what to tell or do with this guy. And he was just really confused about all of this until like a couple years later, he ran across a book called Life After Life, which is a famous book, which was done in like the 70s, I think. All about NDEs and stuff like that. And he realized this is stuff other people have experienced this, but besides me and this guy. Mm-hmm. So, but that's basically the story. And you can go watch the whole 9-minute video. It's clipped from the larger video of the entire conference, which they talk all about like medical stuff. This is the interesting part that we like. And it has Spanish subtitles at the bottom, but it's still the sound is actually better than the original video. And it's a pretty good story.
That's cool. Now, Raymond Moody, he's the one that wrote Life After Life. And that was so cool when he did, because it brought it made it okay to talk about. We run across that with a lot of the topics that we discuss on here. And this is one of them. There was a situation where it made it okay to talk about it, or made people realize that they weren't alone in this, because that is a big feeling with a lot of these NDEs. They're scoffed at, they're made fun of, so they don't talk about it. So other people that have them don't realize that there's a large number of people that are having these experiences. Right. And I had run across on how common near-death experiences are. Now, the estimates on it vary, but some suggest that as many as 10 to 20% of people who have been declared dead have had a near-death experience. And in one study, there's patients who had survived cardiac arrest. 9% of those survivors who could be interviewed reported a near-death experience. Now, that's just of those that could actually be interviewed. So that doesn't mean all of them. That's just the ones that they were able to get interviews with. So it's a big number. It's really wild.
Yeah, it is.
And Jess, I know you have a personal story about a near-death experience. You want to tell it real quick?
Oh, sure. It's not as near-death as, I wasn't declared dead and then brought back. But I had But I had some weird stuff that happened during it. So I was around 8 or 9 years old, and my family had taken a canoe trip at Knoll, Missouri. And previous to that week, a huge amount of storms had blown through the area, and the river was rough. It should not have been open for people to canoe and tube on, but they had it open, and we were having a rough time. We had gone with a huge group of people, and we had rented almost all the canoes out of this one place, and we were the last to get there. So we got one really crappy canoe for me, my sister, my little sister, and my mother and my dad, and only one paddle. They only had one left. And the river was up, and it was rough, and we should never have went on it. We came around a curve, and a huge tree had fallen over into the river and was sitting there, and it was causing a suction underneath of it. And it didn't matter how much my dad paddled, he couldn't keep us away from the pull of that suction. And we got pulled to the log, and we slammed up into the side of it. We went sideways, and when we did, the canoe rolled. And when it happened, my mother fell out first, and she actually got sucked down underneath, and she said she was tangled in the branches underneath for just a little bit, but she managed to kick herself through, and it shot her down the river about a quarter mile. She was pretty banged up, but fine. But when I rolled out, I grabbed my little sister underneath her arms and was just kicking like crazy. I was a very experienced swimmer. And the minute I hit that water, I just started kicking as hard as I can. Of course, back then I thought maybe I had a chance, and looking back at it, I didn't. I started sinking very quickly, and I was watching the ceiling of the water get further and further away, and it was getting colder and colder. And pretty soon, and you hear this with drowning victims a lot, everything just got very quiet and it got very serene. And I'm watching the ceiling going away. It's almost just the tiniest bit of light at the top. And I started seeing these little sparkles all around me in the water. And when I was little, I thought something was in the water with me, that these were like little creatures or something. There was something with me in the water. And when I got older, I started thinking, well, maybe it was because I was getting ready to black out and I was starting to see the little sparkles you get when you start to black out. But looking back on it, the sparkles weren't static in the water like they should have been if I was just blacking out. They moved with the water, the little riplets of water around me. Really interesting. And when they showed up, it got very serene. And I was still kicking, but I wasn't worried anymore. And while this is happening, and I know I'm at the bottom because it's so cold down there, I start rushing up through the water at like breakneck speed. And I shoot up and out of the water and clear it and land on the side of the bank. And what I found out later is that a friend of my father's, who was also on the same trip, had gotten out of his canoe and come back, and he'd gone out on that log to see if he could help somehow. And he said he could see my braid. I had a long braid floating on the top part of the water. And so he reached down and grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out. But the interesting thing is that I was at the bottom and my hair wasn't long enough to do that.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So he yanks me out, and they told me, I don't actually completely remember this part of it, but they pulled me out, and my dad was screaming at me. He had a hold of me and was screaming in my face, trying to get me to breathe. I wasn't breathing, but I was just looking at him like everything was okay. And they said it took about 30 seconds for me to finally take my first breath of air. I guess I just didn't need it yet. I was still in that mode.
Yeah.
But I was fine after that, and they found my mother about, like I said, a quarter mile down the river. My little sister was fine as far as I could tell. She'd just done a great job holding her breath while I had a hold of her. My mom was pretty banged up, but okay. But that was mine. And that incident, I'd had some weird paranormal things happen to me previous to that, but that incident, that near-death experience, is what kicked off my like lifelong experiencer type of situation, which is oddly something that Pam and I have found, and Mark too, when we interview people and things, people who have had near-death experiences similar to that, or even, like the ones as severe as Enzo was talking about. They often become lifetime paranormal experiencers. So
Ian said Ondine's water sprites. Yeah, could have been.
maybe, I don't know.
Pretty cool. I love that story.
It's a weird one.
It is a weird one, but it's so neat.
How old were you?
I was about 8. I'm thinking I was probably closer to 9, but right around 8. My little sister was about 6 at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a scary one.
Mark, you had one similar,
yeah,
didn't you? Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it was scary the moment I hit the water, but after that, after I realized I couldn't get back up to the top, I couldn't kick hard enough. It just those little things showed up in the water with me, and I was just fine. I probably could have just hung out down there.
Yeah. Drowning is not the worst way to go.
I think it would be, but no.
I mean, I don't even remember panicking when I had my incident. I just went black until I was puking all the water out of my stomach and my lungs. I mean, so mine was pretty boring, but I did finish the day fishing, as a true redneck will. It was not worth the double pneumonia I had a couple weeks later, but
I'll bet.
nothing worse than summer pneumonia.
Yeah, that's rough.
Now that almost killed me.
The summer pneumonia.
Yeah, the summer pneumonia.
Uh-oh.
Definitely.
Yeah, the drowning isn't nearly as bad as you think. We'd had last year we had on Robert Prevost, and he had a near-death experience where he also almost drowned. And he also said the same thing. You panic for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just gets very quiet and very serene, and your lungs stop burning, and you just kind of relax. So I don't know if it's your body figuring out how to calm you down in the situation, or if it's something else stepping in. I don't know.
A little of both.
Yeah, probably a combination. Pretty wild, though.
So, yep, drowning seems to be a really common near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
It is, yeah.
I wonder why that is. Is it because you've got like a lot of time? You know what the end is. So it's like, all right, I guess this is it.
Maybe so, because I mean, your body's fine, other than it can't breathe. So your brain is still active. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because I don't know if it's because you're gonna die, so you might as well just relax and let this happen. Because I was so little at the time, I didn't understand that yet. At no time do I remember thinking, oh my God, this is how I'm going to die. I'm going to die if I stayed on here any longer. It just wasn't a part of my brain yet. I was too little, I think, to really grasp that. So I was just more interested in the little things.
Maybe that's why
in the water with me
came to you then, because it helped calm you down and not,
distracted you.
hello, little
Yeah.
one.
Not thinking
We're
about
here
it.
to help.
Yeah.
That's wild. All righty. Okay, I have one. Doesn't have anything to do with drowning, but this is one that I found in I have a couple of books I'm pulling from. I think it was in one of the Mysteries from the Unknown. So this lady, they called her Doris, and the reason that they didn't use her real name was because this doctor, her name was Lady Barrett, and this is it was January 12th, 1924. Her husband is the one that ends up writing about this later. But they did withhold her name when they were reporting the story. But Lady Barrett was an obstetrician. So she delivered a baby for a woman, and Doris was the woman. And after Doris had a really difficult birth, she was laying there and she was dying. And she looked towards one part of the room, and she just had this really radiant smile on her face. And she said, "Oh, lovely, lovely." And when asked what was lovely, Doris replied, "What I see." And she spoke in like this low, intense voice saying, "Lovely, brightness, wonderful things." And so Lady Barrett was like, tell me what you see, basically. But Doris seemed like she was focused on one spot in the room. And then she cried out, "Why, it's Father." And, "Oh, he's so glad I'm coming. He's so glad. It would be perfect if only W," which W was her husband's initial. They kept his name out of it too. "It would be perfect only if W could come as well." So Doris's baby is brought to her, and she looks at it and she's concerned, and she's like, "Well, do you think I ought to stay for the baby's sake?" And so she turns back to her dad and she says, I can't stay. If you could see what I do, you would know I cannot stay." So again, they're presuming that she's speaking to her father, and she says, "I'm coming." And then she's puzzled, and she's comments to the people in the room with her, to like Lady Barrett. And she says, "He has Vida with him." And she looks back at her vision and she says, "You do want me, Dad. I am coming." And then she dies. She proceeds to die shortly after that. And so, aside from this just sheer intensity of this whole thing, the way, Doris's feelings and the way she was talking, it made the greatest impression upon Lady Barrett and her husband. his name was Sir William. He's the one that ends up writing about this later. But the thing that made the biggest impression on them was the fact that Vida, which was Doris's sister, she had died 3 weeks earlier, and they had not told Doris because her health was so precarious at the time with, with the baby and a really stressful pregnancy. But it appears that Doris saw this vision of her sister that she didn't know had already passed. So she wasn't expecting to see her. And I thought that one was really powerful just for the fact that because, it's one thing to say, oh, I see my parents, I see my grandparents, but to see your sister that you didn't know passed away and to be perplexed about why she's there. Yeah, I thought that was cool.
That's another interesting offshoot of the subject is the things that people who are about to die see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty normal for someone to see a loved one waiting on them, starting within a couple days.
My one of my sisters, she's an RN and works in hospice care. And it's a general rule that when any of her patients start talking about seeing people that aren't there or, dead loved ones, she knows they've only got a couple days and they're going to be gone.
24 to 48 hours usually, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
There was my mom, she was a hairdresser before she retired, and she did hair for 40 some years. And as she moved away from doing hair at the beauty shop that she worked at, she transitioned over to doing hair at the guest home here in town for the little old ladies. And so there was one lady that we've known her whole life. She had moved there. And the only reason she had gone in, it wasn't because she was in ill health or anything. She was 96 years old. And, she was living on her own, and she was worried, what if something happened and I didn't, nobody was there to help me. So it was more of her safety is why she wanted to come live at the guest home.
Right.
So we did. And she was telling mom was doing her hair, and she was telling her, it's the strangest thing. I keep seeing some of my family members peeking in my window at night, and it's the freakiest thing. And mom was like, are they coming? Is it closed when they come? And she's like, oh no, they're dead, honey. They're not living. And so mom was like, wow, that's interesting, And so here's this little old lady, perfect health. She passes away within 2 weeks. But she had, mom had done her hair. She went in and did hair once a week. So she'd done her hair twice, and both times, this person had told her, hey, his mom was like, just conversationally, hey, have you, seen your family members again? Oh yeah, they're there. They come almost every night, and, they're smiling and happy, and, it's weird, but it's good to see them kind of thing, And then she just passed away unexpectedly, just within, 2 weeks of her starting to see them.
That.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's a neat person. I knew her my whole life.
It's pretty common, what we've done shows on hospice nurse stories.
Yes.
So, and they see a lot of stuff, and a lot of, and then you get the, what were they called? Trauma apparitions or?
Yes. Crisis apparitions.
Crisis apparitions.
Yep.
There's a lot of stories of that. Phil has a really good one of that. I personally know several people who have seen someone probably right after they died, but before they found out they were dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's super common.
It is. Enzo, you said you had one that might fit in that category. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, a little bit. Not exactly a near-death experience, but it is kind of a famous story from a very famous person I'm sure everyone has heard of, Mark Twain, where in his autobiography, they have a whole chapter in the book about where he had a very vivid, to the point where he thought it was real, dream about the death of his brother, where he like is stirring around and he's walking around inside of his sister's house, which I think was in Memphis. Anyways, and he walks like into like where the living room area is, and he sees propped up on 2 chairs a full metal casket with his brother laying in it, dead, wearing one of Mark Twain's suits, and on his chest he's holding a bouquet of white roses with one red rose like right in the middle of the bouquet. And he's just like mystified, right? And then he like wakes up quickly and realizes it's all, and he even like walked out and he's like, did this really happen? Is my brother dead? What's going on? About 3 weeks later, his brother, much like Mark Twain himself, worked on a riverboat out on the Mississippi, and was involved in an accident on the riverboat that he was working on where the boiler exploded. Ooh. And he was caught up in he was, below decks where the boiler was, and was burned and just battered around from the explosion itself against the bulkheads and stuff down below decks, where he was technically, he was alive for like a couple of days, but then he passed away from his injuries. And when Mark Twain showed up to his sister's place, which is I think in Memphis is where that comes in, he walks into her house, walks into the living room. There on 2 chairs is because normally for something like that, because this was before Mark Twain became Mark Twain. He was still Samuel Clemens back then. Him and his brother, they weren't rich. They didn't have a lot of money, so he was expecting to see his brother in the standard pine board box. And I guess the local ladies club had managed to somehow get an actual like metal type coffin like you would see today for him to be buried in. So he's surprised to see that, and he looks in and he realizes that his brother had stolen one of his outfits. That's why he was wearing his clothes from one time when he was visiting. And as he's looking at it, he's like, wow, this reminds me a lot of that dream I had. And about that time, a little old lady comes in from the women's club that was helping support all this with a bouquet of white roses with one red one in the middle to lay on his chest for the viewing and all that. And he's like, I cannot believe this. This is just, I can't believe that this is identical to the dream I had. He spent, and there's a lot more to it, of course, if you want to go check out Mark Twain's autobiography. But in that same autobiography, that's when he made the prediction for himself of, because when he was born 30 November 1835 when Halley's Comet was going by. And when the autobiography, which was published in 1909, in the autobiography, he says, Halley's Comet brought me into this world. I think it's going to take me out with it next year. It did. It was 2 days after the closest approach of Halley's comet to Earth that he passed away. So predicted his own death and his brother's death. Very
wow. While you were telling that, I remembered one about Abraham Lincoln too. Didn't he have a dream about seeing himself with silver dollars over his eyes or silver eyes? I can't remember what it was, but when he died, they put silver dollars on his eyes.
That was a tradition for a long time. You got to have money for the boatman.
It's also a good way to keep their eyes closed.
Yeah.
Not to be morbid or anything, but because I would never do that. Okay. I do have a crisis apparition story that I wanted to tell while we were on the subject, because I think it's just really wild. So this one happened in May 4th, 1980. And this one was reported by a lady named Hildy Saxer in a small village in South Tyrol. I guess I'm saying that right. It's Tyrol. And she had left her job at a local restaurant at the usual time, which was about 11:30 p.m. And as she started walking home, she happened to see this distinctive gray Audi that belonged to her sister's fiance, and his name is Johann Hofer. Johann Hofer. Yay! Kansas accent strikes again. So she was kind of surprised to see him because he'd left the restaurant like a half an hour earlier. And when he left, he was really stressing, I've got to get home. I'm going straight home. I have to be there soon. So, but there was no question the car was his. And she knew it was him for sure because as she waved, she saw him through the windshield and he slowed his car. He smiled at her and he waved back as he passed by. So about an hour later, Johann's father, he heard him arrive home at his normal time. And the father clearly heard the sound of his son's engine and he recognized the noise because there was like a distinctive turning maneuver that Johann would make when he brought his car into the family's yard. And so he heard that. He knew it was him. But neither Hildy nor Mr. Hofer realized that anything was amiss until the next day. And at that time, it was discovered that Johann was nowhere to be found. And so news came over the radio that there was a major tunnel collapse on the route that Johann usually traveled going home. But nobody thought of anything about it because, he'd been seen by Hildy and by his dad shortly after the cave-in, or heard by his dad anyway, shortly after the cave-in. But, the day goes on, and as Johann fails to appear, his father really starts to get worried, and he's like, something's happened. And days start going by, and still he's not showing up. So it's many days later. That doesn't say specifically how many, but it says many days before Johann's gray Audi, crushed flat between tons of falling rock, could be recovered. And even though his family and friends could scarcely believe it because they were so, they had comforted themselves this whole time because they knew he wasn't there because the tunnel had collapsed at 11:30 p.m. and Johann had been spotted alive after that. So both Miss Saxer and Mr. Hofer, they seem to have experienced what is considered to be a crisis apparition. So it's really interesting, though. It was kind of like he was telling them bye, for her to actually have him drive by and wave, leaving no doubt that that was him for sure. So I thought that was a cool one, too.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
It is. Too bad everybody doesn't have that ability. That'd be neat. Oh, by the way, see you later.
Oh, I am going to haunt you guys. I promise.
Oh,
Absolutely. You wouldn't be a good paranormal investigator if you didn't make that promise, right?
That's right.
yeah.
I'll be haunting you guys.
We all have to come up with a way. Okay, if I find something on the other side, I'm going to come back and I'm going to throw a dime at your head or, something. We'll be sitting on a podcast and the dime will go plunk off of Mark's head.
Oh, yeah, like the Paranormal Rangers story where the coins are just materializing out of nowhere, dropping out of the floor.
That's such a good book.
Well, I mean, I'll get something to catch those coins with.
Right?
Yeah, I would certainly. Well, those guys still have all those coins. They're all like, they have them all separated up into different occurrences and all that stuff. And they carry them around to the shows and stuff. I ran into them at Contact in the Desert 2 years ago. And they talk about it all the time. They're like, yeah, these are them. These are the coins.
And he's from Evan.
Yep.
That is so neat. Does anybody have another story they want to tell? I have some more. I just want to.
I have a quick one it's kind of funny. Cool. That's what it's just a quickie. I couldn't verify all of this because half the links in this particular site are broken for just this one story, but it's a good story.
Oh, man.
Yeah. This is from a Dr. Bruce Grayson. I don't know if he's written books or not. That's the broken part about it. But it tells the story of Al Sullivan, who was a 55-year-old truck driver who was undergoing triple bypass surgery in 1988 when he passed away on the table while they were working on him. But during his NDE, an included an encounter with his deceased mother and brother-in-law, who told Al to go back and to tell one of his neighbors that their son with lymphoma will live. If he was going to die, was he not going to go back? Or they were just going, all right, come on. I don't know. They didn't get into that part of the story. But furthermore, during the NDE, Sullivan accurately noticed the surgeon, Dr. Hariyoshi Takada, operating on him was, quote, flapping his arms as if trying to fly with his hands in his armpits. When he came back to his body after the surgery was over, Sullivan's cardiologist was startled that Sullivan could describe Dr. Takada's habit of arm flapping. It was Dr. Takada's idiosyncratic method of keeping his hands sterile and pointing to surgical instruments and giving instructions to surgical staff.
I love it.
So he took that to be that, that's what he witnessed. So, but there's no way he was dead on the table. How could he have seen that?
Yeah.
So.
And that is not a normal maneuver.
No,
You would
That is not a normal behavior. No.
Yeah. All I could think of was like some dude doing the chicken dance in the surgery.
Yeah, he's
Probably
going
not a time to celebrate. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm dead here. You mind not doing the chicken dance?
Funny. Tony in the comments said, I have a pic of my dad in California near my son 2 months after he passed away. I remember that story, Tony. You've told us that. That's really cool. Really cool.
It is.
Let me see what I got here.
Yeah. I don't have like a full story, but I remember, and you guys probably remember this too. It was one of the most famous ones. I don't know the lady's name or anything, but there was a lady who reported she was dead on the table. They were trying to bring her back, and she was just kind of floating around the room. And when she came to, she was telling them, well, I watched everything that you did. And they were like, no, you didn't. You're just, you were having delusions or, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, no, and you really need to dust. And there's a pin on top of that cabinet up by the ceiling. And they climbed up there just to check. And they did really need to dust. And there was an old dusty writing pen sitting on top of that cabinet.
Wow.
They have no idea how it got up there. Yeah.
They didn't even know it was there.
Yeah,
That's
that's one of
cool.
my favorite ones.
Love it.
I was looking through a bunch of different stuff today. There was somebody that it was again a doctor in their operating theater. They have like these beams with like that hold special lights that point directly in, kind of a thing. On the top part of the beams, they write little messages and stuff so that if people are loading up, kind of a thing, they can see them. They've had people tell them what those messages are.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Cool.
that's pretty cool. That is a
That-
good experiment, actually.
That is
Yeah.
awesome.
That should be a total thing. What is on that pillar? Mama wears combat boots.
Right?
Wow.
I'm coming back to life just to kick your ass, pal.
Yeah. I decided to come back so I can give you a piece of my mind.
I have this fun one, and it's pretty wild. And I don't know if it's an actual near death, but you guys tell me what you think. So there's this lady, and it's titled Her Spirit Gave Her Body a Rest. And so it's this lady, her name's Sarah Norris, and she gets up, she's super sleepy. It's 3:00 in the morning. She has a newborn. So she leaves her bed, totally does not want to, but she's got to go feed the baby, right? So she does. And she walks into the kitchen and she turns the gas on the stove to heat up the pan with the baby's bottle in it, And so while she's waiting, she looks out over their farmyard and listens to night noises. She remembers doing all this, but she had been so stinking tired. She's a farm wife. So not only are you doing normal stuff that everybody has to do every day, but she's also, it's an exceptionally hot summer and they've got the hayers in. So she's having to cook all these heavy meals for the harvest guys and, doing all this extra things on top of being very pregnant and then on top of having a newborn shortly after. So she's not able to catch up on sleep at all. And so, she's basically, do you remember the commercial with the guy, time to make the donuts? And he'd get home, he'd lay in the bed and he'd roll out the other side, time to make the donuts, and just do that over and over. That's kind of what I pictured with this poor woman. So, she's trying to keep up housework. She's trying to do all of this, and it's just not going well. So, she's thinking all these, how tired she is. The bottle's ready. So she tests it on her arm, and she walks into the baby's room and she gives the bottle to the baby. He really, almost before he was ready to cry for it, she goes ahead and gives it to him. So she didn't want to wake up her husband. She's got 2 other kids in the other room. So she turns around and, the baby's pretty much done eating. And this is really bad. She leaves the bottle in there with the baby. And she goes to get back in her bed. And when she opens her bedroom door, let me read this exactly. It says, it was as she returned to bed that Sarah was startled to see her own sleeping form laying next to her husband. The form was unmistakably her own body, hair in disarray, mouth slightly open, one forearm resting above her brow. But how could she be in 2 places at once? There was a tingle of fear and a strange tugging sensation. Then she jerked wide awake with a jolt. It was a dream. It had to have been a bizarre dream. So she gets up, goes to check on the baby. Guess who's got a bottle in the bed?
That
baby.
Sounds like a prime example of astral projection.
Right? But how handy is that? Every mother of a newborn needs that. If you can read this, your dad.
Yeah, Chelsea says on top of the it's a little mean, but oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, way to freak
Actually,
out.
that's kind of Beetlejuicy, like the Book of the Dead kind of thing, where it reads like stereo instructions.
Yeah.
Funny. I thought that was a cool one, though. I don't know if it
is cool.
Doesn't really count as a near-death experience, but she definitely astral projected, and in a really cool way, because it, allowed her body to continue getting rest while she took care of what she needed to do. She was making the donuts.
Yeah, if you could figure out how to monetize that.
Right? Be incredible.
I'm just going to lay here and I'm going to go to work.
I have another
people's cards at a card table or something.
Julie N just came in. Hi, Julie.
Hi. Okay, so this one goes back to December 1943. And this guy, his name's George Ritchie, and American troops, they had just fought the Japanese on the Solomon Islands, okay? And as the Allies, they were getting ready to invade Normandy, and there's this 20-year-old Army private, and his name's George Ritchie. He's celebrating his good luck because after finishing basic training in Abilene, Texas, he gets to go on to medical college in Virginia, and he would go on from there to become a doctor, and the government would be paying for it because he was military. So 7 days before he gets ready to leave for medical school, he gets a really bad chest cold, and it turns into the flu, and he ends up being hospitalized with it. And over the next few days, it seems like he's recovering, but the night before he's scheduled to leave for Richmond, his temperature shoots clear up to 106.5, which everybody knows that is not good. Your brain's cooking pretty much. So everything around him, all he can see is just like this dizzy blur, but he can hear like the click and, of the x-ray machine taking x-rays, and then he hears nothing. But then he wakes up and he's in this strange bed, and he's in this really small, dimly lit room, but his head's clear. And so he's freaking out. He's like, oh my gosh, I might miss the train to Richmond. So he jumps up out of bed and he's looking around for his uniform and he can't find it. So he's looking everywhere. He's looking under the bed. His duffel bag's not there. So, and then he turns around, and when he does, he looks back at the bed, and he's shocked because there's a young man laying in the bed that he had just gotten up out of. And he's like, that's impossible. I was just there. So it freaked him out. So he's like, okay, I'm not going to think about this. I don't have time. I've got to get going. So he's like, runs out of the room. And the first thing he could think of, I've got to get to Richmond. I got to get to Richmond. So out in the hall, there's a sergeant walking towards him, and he's carrying an instrument tray. And so Richie's like, excuse me, Sergeant, you haven't seen the war boy for this unit, have you? And the sergeant doesn't answer or even slow down. So at the last minute, Richie yells at him. He's like, look out, because he's walking into him, but the man walks right past him. And the next minute, he's behind him, walking away without even looking back at Richie. And Richie's just like, I don't even know what this means, So he's like, I've got to get to Richmond. So he runs outside of the hospital, and it's dark, but he realizes he's moving so fast. It's like he's flying through the air. And he looks down, and he's still got his Army hospital pajamas on, and it's wintertime, but he's not cold. And so he's like, okay, I've got to slow down and think about this. So he lands on a street corner in a town by a large river, and there's people that are walking by without seeing him. And he goes to lean up against a thick guy wire that's bracing a telephone pole, but his body goes right through it. And he realizes, oh my gosh. So his quote is, in some unimaginable way, I had lost my firmness of flesh and the body that other people saw. So, he's like, okay, this is weird. But again, his biggest pressing concern was the fact that he wasn't going to be able to study medicine in his present disembodied form now. He's like, I got to get to Richmond. How am I going to do that if I don't have a body? So he's like, okay, I got to get back to my body as fast as I can. So he's like, the second he thought about, I need to be back at the hospital, he's back at the hospital, right? So he gets in the hospital, and he starts running from ward to ward because he can't remember which room he had left when he was headed out. And he's like, all he could see, he's looking at the faces, but it's hard to tell. The light's really dim. And so he's like, okay, I have a very distinguishable, it's an onyx and gold fraternity ring. So I'm going to start looking at hands. And so that's what he does. And he goes through, and he eventually finds this correct ring on the third finger of the left hand, but this body's covered with a sheet. And so for the first time, he's like, I'm dead. This is what we human beings call death. And so he's like, not quite sure what he should do. So at the same time, he's like, well, how can I be dead and still be awake and thinking and experiencing, right? So suddenly, the whole room lights up with this light. And he looks, and he sees that there's this man that's a light form that has appeared. And he said, so from inside of himself, he hears the words, you were in the presence of the Son of God. So simultaneously, it's like everything, he gets the slideshow, or the movie running through all the events in his life, conversations, just everything is a split second going through. And then all of a sudden he wakes up in his own body, which astonishes the physician who had just signed his death certificate, right? And there's an orderly that had been preparing the body. But the orderly, when he was preparing him, he thought he saw like a really feeble sign of life. So he had hollered at the doctor to come check once again. And when the doctor noticed this, he injected adrenaline directly into Richie's heart. So, and this poor kid had not taken a breath for at least 9 minutes. But even though he hadn't, when he woke up, he had no symptoms of brain damage. And the commanding officer at the hospital, they called Richie's case the most amazing circumstance of his career. And he assigned an affidavit that said that George Ritchie had indeed made a miraculous return from virtual death on the night of December 20th, 1943. So the really cool part was this Private George Ritchie, he goes on to become Dr. George Ritchie, who's a psychiatrist who has an opportunity to study dreams and hallucinations. And this work convinced him that his own extraordinary experience was absolutely no delusion, that he had, in fact, seen over the threshold of death. I thought that was neat.
That is pretty cool.
That's a good one.
I think it's hilarious that he wasn't at all concerned that he was dead. He just wanted to figure out how to get going, even though he didn't have a body.
Yeah, he's like, I've
How
got
to make this work.
Yeah, How am I going to become a doctor if I don't have a body? I got to go back and get my body. I thought that was a cool one, though.
That is a good one.
That was a good one. There's tens of thousands of these to find on the internet.
There's a lot, a whole lot. There was one, I don't had the story in front of me, but there was one that I read where, that we haven't even talked about it really during the whole show. The standard going through the dark tunnel with the light at the end, and your loved ones are there to greet you, and you know, because it's a near death experience, not a total death experience, they tell you, oh no, you got to go back. But there was one I read where, they were greeted by their mother and like their father-in-law for some reason, and one of their pets that had passed away like the year before. Is like, oh, there are dogs in heaven. I love it.
That is awesome. I love that. So cool. I have a neat one. This one's just called, I just have it named Mrs. Schwartz. And this one, there was a Dr. Kubler-Ross, and she did a lot of work with these things too, with near-death experiences and dreams and hallucinations and things. So this Mrs. Schwartz had told Dr. Kubler-Ross how there was this time when she was unconscious. She had internal bleeding, and she had regained awareness, and she found herself, again, that common theme of floating above your body. And she could see everything in the room. She could see the doctors and the nurses and their attempts to resuscitate her, but she couldn't speak to them. And so she said she re-entered her body as it was being wheeled to the morgue, and that she startled attendants by pulling the sheet away from her face, after they thought she was dead, which that would definitely startle somebody. So shortly after recounting this incident to Dr. Kubler-Ross, Mrs. Schwartz did in fact die. And around this time, Kubler-Ross, she's a psychiatrist, she said she'd been having a lot of stress with working with the dying and, all these things. So she decided she was going to give up her specialty, right? So she's standing in the hospital corridor, and she just made her decision, and she turns around and she sees none other than Mrs. Schwartz standing beside her, right? And this dead woman, she looks solid, she looks real, she's not ethereal, she's not see-through or anything. And the doctor says, so she led Mrs. Schwartz to her office and asked her to write and sign a note as evidence of her visit. And the woman did. She couldn't talk to her, but she did sign her name on something. And then she walked out of the room and basically off the earth kind of thing. And then later, according to Dr. Kubler-Ross, the handwriting was compared to other samples of Mrs. Schwartz's handwriting, and it was identified as her handwriting. I thought that was crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's...
Chelsea said, I feel like I heard a story somewhere where someone who experienced an NDE had a pet hedgehog that they had felt on their chest during their experience. All pets are waiting for their people.
Love that.
Yeah.
I know more than one of us, we've heard our animals around, that have passed or disappeared.
My cat still gets into bed with me sometimes.
Oh, wow.
So I feel her hop up there, and it's like I get ready to kick her off because I know she's going to lick my feet. It was her thing. And then remember, wait, she's been gone for a while.
Aw.
Yeah. I had a kitty that passed, but her favorite thing were treats. And the ones I got her were in this little plastic bag, and you have to pull it open so it would crinkle. And for a few months after she passed, anytime any kind of plastic crinkled, I could hear her running to the kitchen where her food dish was.
Aww.
It made me cry every time. I was actually very careful about not crinkling plastic for a while because it was a little bit too much for me to handle. Yeah.
Wow.
And I know it was her. I talked to people about it, and they were like, oh, you were probably imagining it because you knew the sound of her running when you crinkled the plastic, so maybe your brain was just, putting that sound with it. But I know it was her. It didn't last very long, just a few months, and then it stopped. But yeah.
Mm.
Sad. I hope If all the animals you've ever had are waiting for you in heaven, I've got a zoo.
You got a
Right?
menagerie of animals.
I've had so many dogs and cats and ducks and
We're all going to have our own
horses.
little entourages following us around everywhere.
How am I
We
going
had
to
a pet
feed all
cow.
these critters?
Julie said that she died, had an experience, and woke up in ICU with tubes everywhere. That's crazy.
Oh, you'll have to write down your experience sometime and send it to us.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I have another one. This guy, his name's Richard Evans. He's from St. Louis, Missouri. And he was crossing, this is out of the book, so you'll see me with my head down here. He was crossing a busy intersection when a car came flying around a corner and was on top of him before he could jump out of the way. And so he wrote that he called it an internal moment before impact. His true soul body seemed to jump out of his physical self, and the real Evans seemed to soar high above the street. And he could see that the automobile was about to hit his physical body. And I had a stunned deer in headlights look on my face. But there was a lady watching from the curb who seemed about ready to go into hysterics. I knew the car was going to hit me, but it seemed as though my real consciousness was not terribly concerned. And then Richard Evans saw that his body go sailing through the air after it was hit, like somebody had drop kicked a football. He didn't feel any pain in his physical body, and he seemed to have a strange feeling of indifference for the body he saw flying through the air that was him. But he had no sense of consciousness connected with that body when it had been struck. He was just like a dispassionate observer. And we do hear that in a lot of these stories. You know, they look down, they see their self, and they're like, oh yeah, that's me. You know, they're very unbothered, kind of, I guess is a good word to use.
Disconnect.
Disconnect. That's a good one. So there's a crowd that starts to gather around Evan's body that's laying on the pavement now, and he's still floating above the street. He's wanting to leave the scene and soar out free into space, is how he puts it. But something's holding him to the scene, and he hears the sirens coming, and he sees police cars. He sees the ambulance pull up, and then he sees a doctor leap out and kneel down beside the body. And he sees the doctor fill a syringe from a small bottle and then shoot liquid into him. And whatever the liquid was, he said it was like a magnet, and it sucked him right back into his body. So it was probably adrenaline, would be my guess. Yep. Kickstarting his heart. Pulls him back into his body. He described the sensation as feeling like he was one of those balls on a rubber string that had been thrown as far as the string could stretch, and now it was being pulled back. So it was just like a snap. Bend and snap. What's that off of? Legally Blonde.
Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
Bend and snap. That's funny. The way my mind works. So the next thing Evans knew, he was back in his physical body and he was blinking his eyes, but everything was kind of blurry. But most of all, he was conscious of being in terrible pain now that he had not had until he was sucked back into his body. And he devoutly wished he was back soaring above the street, away from the agony of his injuries. A little poetic there, but yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of those are like that, you know. They're sad that they're back, but they're happy that they're back. But now they're no longer scared of death. That's a big, and I don't have a copy of Richard Moody's book anymore, but I read him a million times when I was younger. And that is like an overall theme, is once they've had this experience, they don't fear death anymore because they know for a fact that there's something out there, you know, not just going to cease to exist. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Wow.
Right? Julie said, for the first week after my dog passed, I heard her sniff and snort and stamp her feet and felt her lay her head on the bed. Aw, I reached to pet her and talked to her and remembered. Yeah.
That's her is in the picture, actually, her avatar.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't happen. That was not that long ago that happened. Very sad.
Oh, we're so sorry for your loss, Julie.
Yeah, that's.
I have another one that's I don't want to get into the details of it because it just rambles on and on. But another famous person with a near-death experience, in Switzerland of 1944, the world-renowned psychiatrist Carl Jung had a near-death experience. He had a broken foot and was in a hospital, and apparently they were doing the like lifting the skin and digging around, cleaning it out kind of thing, and he had a heart attack during the process because it was so traumatizing. It's Switzerland in 1944. They didn't have the good stuff for to knock you out there. So because that was elsewhere in the world at that time, the European theater. But his encounter, his near-death experience is nothing like any of the other stuff we ever heard about. There was no long tunnel. There were no loved ones. He immediately finds himself about like 1,000 miles above the earth. And he has like this really detailed description of what he was seeing looking down on the earth. This is 20 plus years before, we even launched satellites or anything else. And it was actually kind of accurate the way he described it. For the way he was looking down on the earth. During the experience, he sees like a giant rock kind of thing that he thinks it must be like a meteorite or something like that. And he like immediately zooms in it. When he gets there, there's like steps and there's a meditating Hindu gentleman there. And it gets really bananas past that. But his entire experience, because of course, then they bring him back to life. They gave him basic CPR and stuff like that, where he snaps back out of it immediately back into his very painful body with his foot still hurt. And all of that entire experience, he realized he basically plugged that into what would later become analytical psychology, which centers on the archetypes of the collective unconscious and things like that, which later went on to help a lot of people. That was like kind of like one of the main things that Carl Jung was most known for. So his near-death experience led him to self-analyze and be able to help others.
Nice.
Yes, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's really cool because for scientists, well, I guess he was more of a psychologist, right? But yeah.
Let's be honest, psychiatrists are all kind of crazy themselves too. But it's out there on the internet if you want to go look it up, where it goes on for dozens of pages, him very verbosely describing his entire thing. There may have been more things, but it was like the last thing I read right before coming on here live, so I didn't read all of it. It seemed to just go on and on though, but that's the gist of it. Is his experience from that, he ended up turning into a basic psychology method that is still used today.
That's really cool. That kind of brings us into, how do scientists explain near-death experiences too? I know he's a psychiatrist, but it's kind of an interesting thought. They have a lot of different hypotheses that they come up with. A lot of have been proposed. For example, like out-of-body experiences in NDEs, they may be accounted for like the disruption of the temporal parietal region, key sense to the disembodiment. That's as the brain approaches death. That's one of the hypotheses that are out there. And then some others have suggested that the tunnel imagery that we talked about, where you go through the dark tunnel, is that so many NDEs have, is due to the effect of the slowed down blood flow to the retinas, which kind of pulls your vision out away from you. Like if you've ever passed out before and you get that tunnel vision.
You get that tunnel vision. I've had it before. Yeah.
So those are true things. However, the neurological basis of NDEs, they are not fully yet understood. Even, we're talking 2025 research, and they're still open to alternative accounts that go beyond brain activity. Nobody knows. It's just one of those things that has not been determined yet. Now, if you look at a Freudian view, this is going back a little bit older, obviously. He felt that one's unconscious is convinced of immortality and that death is unimaginable. So both the life review and the out-of-body sensation are devices of the mind to escape the reality of death by basically pretending that you're just a spectator and it's not happening to you. So that was the Freudian view of that. I don't know.
I like, so we could also go the other science way and we could talk about quantum theory.
Oh, absolutely.
Quantum theory.
There you go.
Yeah. So I actually went and looked it up because I was remembering that as we were talking about it. I was like, wait a minute. There's quantum theory involved with this. Scientist Hugh Everett actually started this back in the 70s, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, 70s, 80-ish or whatever. He called it quantum immortality. And he based it on the parallel multiverse theory. So your NDE, your close death experience, you actually did pass in your prior line, and your consciousness moved over and created a near-death experience for you in the secondary line. And I remember one of the stories that we told about that. There was a teenager who had gone on vacation with her brother and her parents, and they were taking a very long trip. And partway through this trip, she remembered her father veering off the road because they were getting ready to get hit. And she remembered the car spinning. She could smell fire and smoke, metal, and she tasted blood. And then all of a sudden, she was fine in the car. But everything in the car was incredibly quiet. And everything seemed surreal, like she wasn't quite in the car, but she was. And that lasted for about a half an hour before it all started kind of correcting itself. But she could still taste the blood in her mouth, even though she didn't have any. And then after that, nothing was ever quite correct. And then we started getting into Mandela. She was having a lot of Mandela type experiences. But it was one of the case in points for that theory that if we all live, if we have one consciousness that floats between multiple parallel universes, it would be very easy if we were to die in one to simply pass into the one closest to us. So we would die in one line, but the next line we would have had a near-death experience and continued on. Kind of interesting.
It is interesting. And, that comes up there more than once where people feel like they're in the middle of a traumatic accident or, something's happening to them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it's like they shake free and everything's back to normal and nobody's acting like anything just happened except for the person that's freaking out because they thought they were going to die. More than likely they did.
Mm-hmm. Most of the, NDE type stories like that where, you're dead. Whatever it was that caused you to be dead, usually is wrought with pain and everything else. So you get into that, you follow the long tunnel, you see your loved ones and your pets or whatever it is, or apparently meditating Hindus, if you're Carl Jung, an asteroid. You experience this point where you're pain-free. You have nothing else going on except just this bliss around you. It's like, oh, no, you need to go back. And you're rightful pain because somebody's pounding on your chest or shoving needles into you and everything else. So it's tough coming back from that NDE where you've experienced that perfection, that afterlife that we are so sought after. But you have to wait till the end. You can't take a shortcut to that. Mm-hmm. So it is that's the double-edged sword. You got a glimpse, but you're going to pay with pain because when you come back, because you are damaged already. That's how you got there in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And, that's another thing. Our near-death experience is always peaceful. Not always,
I've been a few stories where it is more fire and brimstone than love and light.
Absolutely. I ran across one, and it was a widower whose wife had passed, and he tried to kill himself, and he didn't succeed, but he did have a near-death experience, and he was like, that was his whole purpose of doing this, was so he could be with his wife. And he's like, wherever it was that I ended up, she was not there. And I am so thankful I did not stay, because that is not somewhere I wanted to spend any amount of time, let alone eternity. So yeah, there are reports of, really frightening near-death experiences, those that involve negative feelings, being alone in the darkness is one, or other frightening scenes. Those appear to be relatively rare. But I didn't get a chance to look to see what the statistics were on those, or if there are statistics, as opposed to I know statistically, if you're one specific religion, like if you're Christian, if you're Buddhist or whatever, if you have a near-death experience, you're more than likely going to meet whatever figure it is that is a prominent in your religion. But I did not look at statistics, and again, if there are even any, for if people that run across these bad ones, if they, thought they were going to hell, if they felt like they deserved to go to hell, or if hell was a part of their religious makeup,
Right.
or, did they not have a religion? And one thing I did see that I thought was interesting, because you have people that are atheist that have near-death experiences, and they may have been like, oh, when you die, you die, that's it. You're just, the lights go out. Why worry about the afterlife? Because there's nothing. You're just going to be gone, only to find out that they have a near-death experience and realize, my soul did not die here. There's something out there. There's something.
Oh, hell, I was wrong.
You don't know everything like you thought you did.
Exactly. So I thought that was interesting, because does it keep them from being an atheist? No, but it makes them agnostic, which is not atheism. Atheism is the lack of belief in anything. Agnostic is you think there's something out there, you just don't know what it is. So yeah, it makes them more agnostic. I thought that was interesting and fun.
I mean, nothing like watching them work on your body from above. It's like,
Right.
maybe I should rethink a few things.
I'd probably be
the
like,
doctor's doing this thing, and there's
Yeah.
messages on top of the beams that are telling me I'm dead.
I'd probably be like, man, my scar looks really weird from this angle. I should work on that or something.
Well,
What I'd be doing.
Something else.
Plastic surgery can I
Dude,
get?
I need to lose weight.
Some people look at themselves
Why
outside.
did they tell me my fast was so big?
They don't recognize themselves for a moment, because they don't see themselves
No.
from that angle, and then it's
Right.
the shock.
And
Oh, wait a minute.
When you do, it's a mirror image when you see yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
So you see yourself the right way.
Yeah.
Which, being professional YouTubers like us, we're used to seeing ourselves the correct direction. But it's for most other normal people, it's confusing to see yourself as you are.
It
Normal is boring.
Yeah.
is. Well, we're all okay then, because none of us are normal.
Yeah. Change my name to Abby.
Abby
Abby Normal.
Abby normal. Right.
Yes, I had to sneak in a Young Frankenstein quote. Sorry.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Frau
We would-
Bruca.
Yeah.
Frau Bruca.
If I had a thunderclap and horses screaming, I would, yeah.
That would be awesome. That would have
I
been
have a
epic.
hump.
You what?
Wasn't that on
I
the
have
other
a hump.
Yeah. Walk this way, sir.
Tony said, not normal is better. That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
100%.
Anybody can be normal.
So-
Yeah, it takes somebody special to be Abby Normal.
Right. So we've had this discussion about all of this. What do you guys think? What are your feelings on it?
There's something else going on after we die.
I would agree.
There's something going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree.
Something is going to be happen, and we really won't know until that time comes.
It's the
That's why
great
they say
unknown.
the best for last.
Yeah, it's like that. The story about the larva and the dragonfly. Larva tells all of its little larva buddies, when I become an adult, I'll come back and tell you what it's like. But they're forever separated by that layer of water.
I've never heard
Deep.
that. That's actually deep. Yeah.
Wow. Mark always surprises us. He acts silly and then comes up with something amazing at the end.
I wish I could take credit for that, but I read that parable in a book many, many, many years ago, and it's probably older than a lot of our listeners.
But you remembered it and were able to spit it out at the right moment.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I can remember really old things. I can't remember what I did with my watch.
Understand. I feel your pain.
My keys.
Well, I'm not sure. Do we have anything left to really talk about on that, or do we want to move on to the notebook game?
I think it's time for the notebook game.
We can do the notebook game.
Woohoo!
All right.
I'm certainly out of story. I researched for the show.
I've
All right.
all the good ones that I have.
Wow, look at that.
How many you got?
We've got 5 notebooks. All right. You know how it goes, but I'll explain just in case there's anybody new. I have 5 notebooks full of every little thing you can probably think of.
Here we go.
Pick a notebook 1 through 5 and a page number 1 through 75, and I will read whatever is on that page. It could be near-death experiences. It could be something about haunted cheese. I don't know. We'll find out. Cheese.
Okay, the first one, notebook 5, page 11.
I'm looking. Okay.
Might as well do 10 and 11 because Tony's got 5, 10.
Oh, and I'm going to jump while you're
Oh.
looking. Ian jumped in
color.
when he asked what our consensus was, and he said brain chemicals.
Brain chemical.
Yeah. Could be.
And that is one of the
That is one of the
ideas.
theories, yeah.
There's a dump of all the good stuff that your brain saves up right at the very end and give you that last little happiness before you go. Kind of an idea. But that doesn't explain how multiple people see a similar thing. But our tunnel, the loved ones at the end, and they send them back. And there's a lot of similarities for a lot of near-death experiences. We didn't go super deep into all of that. I know a lot of my stories certainly didn't. But there's something else going on when you've got people all over the world describing kind of the same thing.
And the sister, seeing her sister that had died that she didn't know she was dead.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready?
Ready.
All right. So the 511 is on the Teos Mystery Hum.
Oh, nice.
Teos, New Mexico.
Since
Since 1991, the constant hum or drone of a low-frequency sound has been reported by about 2% of the population of Teos, New Mexico. The low buzz ranges from 30 to 80 hertz. Often reported, to sound like Tibetan throat singing, a swarm of bees, a swarm of cicadas, a jet stream, or the throbbing hum of a large truck. It also comes in the perfect key of E flat, oddly enough. In March of 1992, a local woman named Catania Salzman wrote a letter to the Teos News. She complained of a deafening din that was keeping her awake. Her letter struck a chord with readers and prompted an avalanche of responses and similar stories. A team of scientists from the Phillips Laboratory at Los Alamos Sandia National Laboratories and the University of New Mexico were tasked with monitoring the sounds, the acoustic, seismic, and electromagnetic energy, but came up with nothing. They did, however, use sophisticated geophones to measure vibrations in the earth. They didn't discover the cause of the hum, but did discover the sounds of an overly large colony of gophers that had been tunneling underneath Teos.
Maybe they get
The
together and
mis-
hum.
Yeah.
We'll get Bill Murray on the case. for
Instead of whistling
Caddyshack.
while you work,
Yeah.
they hum while they work.
Yeah, they're all na 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 na. The mystery of the Teos hum remains today, and it is still being reported.
I feel the important part about that is not everybody can sense or hear the hum. A lot of people cannot. Some people can. There are people that have certainly moved into that area and like, no, this is bananas. I can't take it anymore. I gotta leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, that's super weird. The Taos hum.
Taos is on my
Yes.
bucket list. I would love to go.
Oh
And-
my gosh, I would love to go.
Yeah.
It's on my list.
Yeah. On the next page, just for fun, because that was a short one, I have a little small listing of some other places where a hum has been identified, a similar. In the 1970s, a similar hum was reported in the British city of Bristol. Larg, Scotland has been reporting a hum since the 1980s. A similar sound was reported in Whitehill, Scotland in 2001. On and off again, a hum is heard in both Leeds and Manchester, England. Also reports in Canada, Australia, Germany, New Zealand. A reported E-flat hum was found in Hythe, Hampshire in 2013. And there's also one reported off and on in St. Louis, Missouri. And down below that, I have a little note to myself if you guys want to go check it out. There's a thing called the Worldwide Hum Project. And the website is Global Data Mysteries of Known Hum Spots. So go check that out, and you can go and they have like a full listing of all the places where the hums are. Kind of neat.
That's cool.
Okay,
Ian
so
said,
we've got to
"Clearly
go.
Government building secret tunnels. We'll blame it on the gophers."
So we're doing like the one before that, right? One page
Yeah.
before?
Yes.
Okay.
Morning.
This
Page 10.
is the end of a story. So I'm going to flip back to the page before it so we can catch the story. El Muerto, the Headless Horseman of the Rio Grande story. Yeah. This is the Headless Horseman.
Fascinating.
Yeah. 1850. Vidal. Oh no, his name is Vidal. Vidal, a cattle rustler in South Texas, had a dead or alive bounty on his head. During the summer of 1850, Vidal took advantage of a Comanche raid that had pulled most of the local men northward to fight off the attack. He and 3 of his henchmen rode into the unguarded settlements and stole as many horses as they could find and headed southwest towards Mexico. Vidal didn't know that among the stolen herd were several prize Mustangs belonging to a Texas Ranger named Creed Taylor, who had not gone after the Comanche. Taylor and 2 other Texas Rangers tracked Vidal down and killed them while they were sleeping. Wanting to set an example to deter future bandits, they beheaded Vidal and lashed him firmly into a saddle on the back of a wild Mustang. They tied his hands to the pommel and secured his torso to hold him upright, and then lashed his head and sombrero to the side of the saddle, and turned the horse loose to wander the Texas hills. Soon stories began to abound about a headless rider. As time went on, more and more people reported shooting at the frightful headless rider, but he never fell to the bullets. Soon the legend of El Muerto began. Bad luck reportedly followed anyone who spotted him. Finally, a posse of local ranchers captured the wild pony at a watering hole near the small community of Bend Bolt, just south of Alice, Texas. Still strapped on its back was the dried-up corpse of Vidal, now riddled by scores of bullet holes and Indian arrows. Because the Indians had shot at him, too.
Indians were like, nope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
The body was buried in an unmarked grave near Bend Bolt, and the horse was freed. Sightings of El Muerto were often reported by soldiers at Fort Inge, after now present-day Uvalde, and travelers and ranchers in the no man's land area also reported seeing his apparition. In 1917, a couple traveling by covered wagon to San Diego, Texas, reported that they saw a large gray stallion speed by their campfire with a headless man, shouting, "It's all mine." In 1969, there was also a rash of sightings near Freer, Texas. That's all I have on it.
That poor horse.
Wow.
Get shot at constantly. Good grief. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't get away from the stink.
Crazy stuff.
Right? Oh, that's true. Yuck. Oh, that was Enzo. One of the theories is there's a deep underground military base in the mountains around Taos. Yes, I've heard that. And Ian said weather gophers.
Weather gophers.
Yeah, Julie said the same. I'm surprised they didn't kill the horse when they were firing at it. Yeah, that's wild.
Probably scared the hell out of the poor horse.
I know. Poor thing. Goodness.
They're shooting at me.
Dragging this dead body all over the countryside. Ugh.
If it weren't bad enough, now they're shooting at me.
Okay, the next one is Ginger, Notebook 4, page 33.
All right, I'm getting it pulled up here. Almost there.
And Chelsea was like, haunted cheese. This was a ways back. Haunted cheese. Now I want an episode on haunted foods. That would be fun.
Okay. This is part of an excerpt out of Monsters Among Us, which is a book by Linda S. Godfrey, and then some of my own notes with it. So this is, hold on, let me backtrack and look. Okay. So I was working on, there's a phenomenon. So we're talking about high strangeness here. There's a phenomenon where they have found heavy Bigfoot, that goes along with light anomalies and UFOs, like the trio. Happens together a lot. And it's the very end of some notes I took from Linda S. Godfrey. But I made a listing. There's a listing here. Long-term established histories of multiple phenomena with BF, Bigfoot, lights, and UFO within the U.S. And this is just my list. So... Big Thicket, Texas, or the Light of Saratoga, Brown Mountain, North Carolina, Yakima Indian Reservation, Washington, Gonzales Lights, Louisiana, the Gurdon Light in Arkansas, the Hornet Spook Light in Missouri, Mount Shasta, Skinwalker Ranch, Silver Cliff, Colorado, the Surrency Light in Georgia, the Paulding Light in Michigan, the Bragg Light in Texas, the Marfa Lights in Texas, the Oviedo Lights in Florida, the Mako Light in North Carolina, Coal Mountain Light in West Virginia, the Screven Spook Light in Georgia, the Bridgewater Triangle in Michigan, the Bingham Light in South Carolina, the Anson Light in Texas, the Hebron Light in Maryland, the Illinois Central Light in Mississippi, the Cove County Light in North Carolina, the Vander Light in North Carolina, the Pactolus Light in North Carolina, the Thomas Divide Ghost Lights in North Carolina, the Somerville Lights in South Carolina, the Dover Lights in Arkansas, and the Superstition Mountains in Arizona are all spots where there's a Bigfoot, light anomaly, and UFO connection, where they're all seen at the same time.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a show on that sometime, just on the spook lights. That might be an interesting one.
Do you have a spot around your area that I know you have spook lights and all that stuff, but
yeah, we have some out in the Sandhills area, we have a ridge. They call them the Pioneer Lights because it's a trail that the pioneers used to take down. And if you go out there just after the sun sets, you can see the lights trail down it.
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll have to. We need to make a note to show you that.
Yeah.
I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. Fun fact: I went to Joplin last night and listened to Lisa Martin from Dark Ozarks do a talk, and she did bring up Spooklight, and there was about 20 people in attendance, and she's like, and they were all from Joplin, and so she was like, if you've seen the Joplin Spooklight, raise your hand, and at least 10 people raised their hand, and she said, because as you know, we're all ladies of a certain age, because it was all ladies that was there, to see this many raise their hands anymore, because sightings of the spook light have gone down, but they think it's because, number one, the road was paved and the shoulders were taken out, so there's nowhere to park. Even though it's seen within like a 10-mile radius, there's really no set space to park. You have to be really on the lookout for it basically anymore to see it. But another thing is social constructs. The kids now think that it was just a tale. You know, they haven't experienced it for themselves. And so they don't believe in it anymore. So nobody's going out with as much frequency to look for it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. We've been out a couple of times and haven't seen it, but we weren't there very long either because there's nowhere to park.
Yeah. You can get in trouble if you park out there too long.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's houses out there now too. Okay.
We ready for the next one?
Yes. Whoops. I missed that one. There we go.
All right. So this one I've already got pulled up.
Yay.
This is on the West 57th Street penthouse in New York, New York. It's haunted.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it's haunted.
It's a penthouse.
This is an older one, so I'm going to have to refresh myself as I go here. Okay, 1927. While vacationing in Paris, Albert Champion, a professional cyclist and inventor of the spark plug, so thank you for the spark plug, sir,
Yes.
stumbled upon his much younger wife, Edna Crawford, formerly of Kansas City, with her French lover named Charles Brazil, canoodling in a bar. It actually said canoodling, so yay. The two men fought, and Brazil pounded Champion. Hours later, Champion died of heart failure. The fight went uninvestigated. Edna received his $12 million and returned to New York with Brazil in tow. She bought an entire building on West 57th Street for $1.3 million, even though the first 3 floors were a medical office for the mentally ill. The couple remodeled the entire top floor penthouse, complete with a 40-foot Venetian mural that featured a nude portrait of Edna and a $30,000 gold canopy bed. One night, during a heated, drunken row that had gone too far, Brazil beat Edna to death with a telephone.
Oh my God.
Edna's bodyguard. Yeah. Edna's bodyguards then grabbed Charles and threw him over the balcony. He fell 19 stories to the sidewalk below and died instantly. The penthouse remained empty for years until a radio producer, Carlton Alsop, his wife, and their 4 Great Danes moved in. The dogs began acting strangely, whining, and refusing to enter the apartment. Both Carlton and his wife reported hearing the click-clack of women's high heels when no one was there. Mrs. Alsop, too afraid to stay, abandoned the apartment and her marriage. Carlton began throwing raucous parties to cheer himself, but guests complained of feeling too ill at ease. They reported the feeling of being watched and being followed down the stairs by a ghost of a woman. Eventually, Carlton went mad and checked himself into the very mental clinic that still ran just below his penthouse. The penthouse became unrentable and Carlton abandoned the property at a considerable loss. The apartment remained empty for many years until 2010, when it came up for rent again. In 2011, an art gallery, the Ford Project, held an exhibition there and allowed the history of the haunting to help push the art show. The eerie atmosphere persisted, deterring prospective occupants. Today, the penthouse has been broken up into apartments that never seem to be occupied for very long.
I was going to say,
And that's
because
the end
that,
of it.
takes care of a home.
Yeah.
My goodness.
This alternate Ghostbusters 1 episode is very different than I imagined it would be. That's
Push.
Oh my goodness.
Where did this go? I wanted to show this. Oh, Ian, I discovered today that Mr. Ed, the talking horse, is buried in Tahlequah. Yes, he is. Very cool. He has
And
a
he
really
still
cool
talks.
Tahlequah. I wonder if things had worked out differently if we had been talking about Tahlequah somehow today.
We could have brought that up.
Yeah.
We'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was a good. It's a good subject.
It is. I'm lost. Is Chelsea next? I think that was Julie's, wasn't it? Is it book 4, page 72? You just did 343. Okay. Sorry, Chelsea. I got lost.
Okay. This is a little short thing. This is an excerpt. What's going on with the... Are we okay?
I don't know.
What?
Good. Keep going.
Okay. I kept hearing somebody talking.
Oh, I said don't talk
was-
about me like that. You said this was just a little short thing. Is
Oh, okay.
that what it was?
Maybe that's what it was. This is an excerpt from Mysterious Kentucky. It's another series of books. If you're interested in the Kentucky area, which you should, because that's where Enzo hails from. And we've done a lot on the Kentucky area. Pick it up. There's 2 books, Mysterious Kentucky 1 and 2. Really interesting. This is a story out of the first one. This is on the Kentucky Sky Castle story. Happened in 1975 to Barton Nunley, who was 9, and his older brother Dean Nunley, who was 10 at the time. They were traveling with their family on a gravel road named Mound Ridge Road, headed home from a trip to the store. Sitting in the back seat, Barton spotted a large cloud mass floating above some trees. The center of the mass began to swirl and move out of the way to reveal a round hole, inside of which looked like a brick castle, complete with turrets and a red banner blowing in the breeze. He could even see an iron reinforced door inside the hole. He gestured to his brother, who then also spotted it. As they traveled, the cloud was blocked suddenly by trees, and by the time it was visible again, had become a regular cloud. And that's the end of the story. If I remember correctly, because it's been a little while since I've read it, either Barton or Dean is one of the authors of Mysterious Kentucky. So I think it was a personal story.
Oh.
I had it because we were doing... it was like Time Storms or something like that, maybe. It was the Time Storms, Time Storms or something like that. Yeah. I think that's what it was.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just a little weird.
Little weirdness.
238.
Yeah, Ian has book 2, page
Ian.
38.
Okay, this is the second page of Brown Springs. All right. The Legend of Brown Springs, Oklahoma. This is kind of more towards Texas from us. I've never actually been there myself, but I have a friend who actually is like the historian of the area. That's how I found out about this. His name is Butch Bridges. You should check him out on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, go check out Butch Bridges. I all of his entire page is on Brown Springs and the hauntings there and the weirdness. So if you want to get to Brown Springs, it's no longer an actual little town. It's just a little area that used to be inhabited a little bit. It's kind of become a ghost town type of area. It's north of Red River in Love County off of Interstate 35. Brown Springs was once a gathering place for outlaws in the 1800s. The Texas Rangers, we've got like a Texas Rangers thing going on today. The Texas Rangers were known to have often hid in that area and ambushed known criminals, picking them off one by one. They would simply bury them where they dropped in unmarked, shallow graves. There were also rumors of a group that would rob, rape, and kill people traveling through. One day, a victim managed to escape, and the males of her family came back to hunt them down. One man was captured, savagely beaten, tied to a tree, and left out in the open so that the man dog in the area would smell and eat him alive.
Oh,
so the man dog, which I probably think now is probably a dog man, or there's also a Bigfoot, but the description doesn't sound right. The man dog of the area is known to stalk people, kill livestock, and chase and run in front of passing cars on nearby Interstate 35. The Brown Springs Cemetery on a nearby hill are the remains of the old cemetery. 26 burials, but only around a dozen stones are left. The stones date to the 1800s, and all are under the age of 20, and 8 were under the age of 5 years old. So kind of strange. And also I'll note here, if you go and check out Butch Bridges' page, and I think if you just look it up on the internet, you could probably just go find this picture. He has a very famous picture he took. He was out photographing the cemetery one day, and he took a picture. I'm back. Okay. He took a picture of one grave in particular, and in the upper right corner, I want to say, it's been a long time since I've seen it, in the leaves that are in the background, it looks like there's a face of a child pressing up through the ground. It's creepier than heck looking. Yeah. You'll have to go look it up sometime.
I think I'm going to nope right out of that one.
Yeah.
In 1988, a woman's body was found floating in the pond at the springs. She was a victim of 2 men from Texas who were on a killing spree. Several other bodies were found when they dredged the pond. 4 more victims from the same 2 men, all with their throats cut. That's absolutely true. Another story tells of a young couple out parking in the area who were drugged from their car and attacked by a monster resembling a Bigfoot. More recent stories have popped up in the area, lending credence to their story. Tales of terrain and paths shifting come up often. One group out hiking reported that they had followed an open trail that led up to the hill to the old cemetery. They got concerned hearing noises and feeling like they were being watched. They left quickly, only to realize that the clear path they had followed up was suddenly extremely overgrown, with thickets and brambles making it hard to get back down. Then they couldn't find their car they had left at the start of the path. To this day, they insist it had been moved.
Wow.
So that kind of weird stuff happens there, yeah. Paranormal claims overall, ghosts of the old outlaws and murder victims are often seen. The man dog, the Bigfoot, the haunted cemetery, weird sounds, the feelings of being watched, shifting paths, and time slips all occur within this little area.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I do know that they often found more bodies than just what they found in the ponds. It was a dumping ground for the Oklahoma and Texas mafia for a while too.
Oh, lovely.
From what Butch has told me. Yeah. He's a hoot and a half. I'll have to see if I can't get him on sometime because he's pretty funny.
Good. Ian said, I have a habit of picking a jolly story. But they're always interesting. Who would have thought, Jess, back when you first started writing everything in notebooks, just willy-nilly, that they would be so interesting?
They're
And we
entertaining.
out of them.
I'm so glad you guys think so. I had no idea that anyone would give two hoots about what the heck was in my scribbled out notebooks.
I knew. Yeah.
Everybody thank Enzo, because we would not be doing this at all if it were not for Enzo, who was like, hey, maybe somebody else might like to hear what's in your crazy ass notebooks.
I saw the value in what you had written down many years ago.
He did. All right. Do we have any else?
I think that was it. We are done.
All right. Oh yeah, we're at the end of the second hour.
So
we're ready. All right. Well, really quick. Thank you everybody in the chats for hanging out with us tonight. We hope Jason Roberts is, his whole situation gets under control and we send him our love and well wishes. Thank you to Mark and Enzo for swooping in tonight and, helping us out with a topic that came out really fast. And I'm going to give 2 really big thumbs up to Pam because I was incredibly busy today and could not lend her a hand getting this last minute show. So go Pam. I think it came out pretty good for it being last minute. Right. So, trust us to throw together something this nutty last minute. So we can totally
do
it. Yeah. Okay. So
Jess's notebook game is awesome. We learn all kind of fascinating stories. That's the truth. That is the truth.
Well, I'm glad that you all enjoy my weird little hobby. My strange little hobby.
I always look forward to it.
Yeah. All right. So before we go, again, thank you everybody in the chats and for playing the notebook game. Make sure to hit that bell, hit the thumbs up, like and share, whatever platform you're on. If you're listening right now on your podcast, go ahead and give us a little quick rating. We would so appreciate it. Even if you didn't think it was that great, give us 1 or 2 stars. Show us a little love.
You're out there.
If you really liked it, give us the 5.
Tell us we're not screaming into the void.
Exactly.
I think your show was a 10 out of 5.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, we should be available on all podcasting platforms. If you can't find us on your favorite, please let us know so we can rectify that situation.
Absolutely.
Catch an all-new show every 2 weeks on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Central. Next one will be June 18th. And we'll release that topic here pretty soon on Facebook. And I think that's it. Do you guys have anything else?
I think that's it.
I'm pretty good.
All right. Well, then keep it weird, keep it strange, and remember, it's all connected. Good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.